Hello, my name is Karl Middleman, and I hope you'll join me for an end-of-year workshop at Pendle Hill called Music of Inspiration for an Age of Anxiety. Our course begins on December the 28th and lasts until January the 1st. It's designed to inspire you with the stories and the music of great composers. One of the things that most appeals to me in my own studies is learning about music's contexts beyond the notes. For nearly 200 years, Western art music was taught to be an end in itself, music for music's sake, and the contexts from which the music sprang were ignored. Now, this worked fine for people who were already acculturated to high music, but it effectively put off many potential listeners. Times have changed, and we can better appreciate music by looking at the social and political context surrounding it. In Music for an Age of Anxiety, we'll look at many different musical topics. For example, we'll look at a few ways through history that war is represented in music. The topic of war, specifically battle, interested the 17th century German composer Heinrich Bieber. He was a violin virtuoso, and in 1673 he composed a work for strings called simply The Battle. Scholars believe that he may have been referencing the 30 Years' War in Germany several decades earlier, because different parts of the piece depict the troops marching, praying, wailing, even drinking and getting smashed. Here's the part where they engage in battle. Listen for snap pizzicato effects on the double bass. 100 years later, in 1777, Mozart presented a more humorous vision of battle. For many centuries before Mozart's time, the Ottoman Empire posed a grave threat to the Austrians. Being a classical period optimist, Mozart kept his musical treatment of battle rather light. In his famous Turkish march for piano, listen for thundering chords in the left hand, which probably represent a popular image of the clunky Turkish garrisons. But then note the tingling high notes that simulate the jingling of the Turkish triangles, a more representative instrument of the Turkish Janissary bands. For Mozart, the topic of battle was not serious at all. However, for Brahms, it was an altogether more serious matter. Brahms looked inward, and his depiction of battle became more a matter of life and death. At the age of 35, he composed his German Requiem partly in tribute to his mother, who had died a few years earlier. As a German Protestant deeply embedded with the cultural values of his time, Brahms treated resurrection as a huge battle for the soul. The soul's victory over death is hard fought, and it's on a grand scale. Here's the text. At the sound of the trumpet, the dead will be raised incorruptible. Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? One of the benefits of studying different composers' responses to the same theme is renewing our awareness that we're not alone. How we live with our aloneness is frankly something we think about a lot. At times we may despair over being alone. But when we look at the different ways that great composers, great writers, great artists handled their aloneness, how they handled their stress, we might just take some comfort. We may be inspired, and we can also acquire new perspectives against we can measure ourselves. In this course, we'll look at music and life stories of many composers who faced adversity. Take the story of Florence Price, an extraordinary early 20th century African American composer. She was an intellectual fellow of W.E.B. Du Bois and Langston Hughes, and fairly on in her career, she secured a prized performance with the Chicago Symphony. But for the next 20 years, she was marginalized on account of her gender and her skin color. Yet, she remained undaunted. And we'll look also at the issue of madness, as expressed in 8 Songs for a Mad King by the British composer Sir Peter Maxwell Davies. And we'll look at the extraordinary odyssey of the American composer John Cage, who sought Eastern philosophy as a hedge against the driving forces of Western modernity. For Cage, the purpose of music was to sober the mind and to quiet the mind so that it might become susceptible to divine influences. We'll touch upon a lot of topics that impact our daily lives, our joys, our sorrows, our anxieties, and hopefully we'll find renewal and inspiration in learning the stories and hearing the music of composers who dealt with serious issues like ours. An additional highlight of the program will be our annual New Year's Eve concert featuring a return visit from the wonderful dancers of the popular dance company Dance Fusion. And we'll also host the outstanding duo team of harpists, Janet Whitman and Mindy Kuchar. Thank you for joining me for this brief preview. I hope you'll join me again for a thoughtful and exciting experience at our end-of-year workshop at Pendle Hill.